Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultants channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. And this is part 2 of my video, Stranded in My Car. At least this time that I'm stranded in my car. It's happened far more many times than I can count over the last 4 years. But if you watched my previous video, you know where I stood there. Well, what happened? I ended up in the car for about 4 days, and like I said at the time, I could still get to work technically, haul all my stuff inside. By the time the 4th day arrived, I was out of food, and it was finally my day off, so I had to try to do something. Still got no help from my co-workers. One person offered me a ride home. Bless her heart, but that's not really going to work for me, is it? But, all the people I asked if they could bring certain tools to help me diagnose what was wrong and what have you, they just blew it off, and they'd come in and go, "Oh, yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry, man. Maybe tomorrow." Yeah. So what happened? On that 4th day, I really didn't have any option, did I? Turned out to be a nice day, a fairly warm day, sunny. I had to grab the most expensive stuff I had, put it in a heavy bag, and I had to do that walk that I told you about. Now, since then, I have actually gone to Google Maps and measured out the distance, and I was pretty close. It's 2.8 miles. So I thought it was between 3 and 4 miles, but 2.8 miles. So I did that walk. I actually videotaped aspects of the walk because there was so much garbage all along the sidewalk, bottles of booze, and you can just tell by the area it's in, a business park, out in the middle of nowhere and that kind of thing. This wasn't homeless people leaving all this junk around there. Every one of those cups, every one of those pieces of garbage on the ground, all the broken glass, I can almost promise you came from housed people. The same housed people who say that homeless people are so worthless, they don't deserve our society doing anything to try to help them of any meaning or consequence at all. Just a bunch of token shows that keep social service workers employed doing next to nothing. Maybe I'll still show those videos in this, I don't know, but I filmed that. I filmed some other things along the way of interest. And when I got to that 3 mile, or 2.8 mile point, there was I'd actually planned to go get food first, but I saw a church there. And if you know my experience with Minnesota churches so far, I'm sure you can imagine what was going through my mind. And again, I may or may not show you the video just to save time more than anything, but as I was walking, I had to cross the highway, and I see the church over there, and as I look at it, the big steeple and everything, right directly in front of the building, in between me and that, was a big "Do Not Enter" sign. And I couldn't escape the irony of that. It was about 7 in the morning, so I didn't expect anyone to be there anyway. So what I did was I walked over to that church. They actually were open. There were only a few people there. And I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. The first thing I saw was parked outside in a little cave in the church was a golf cart. Actually, that's the second thing I saw. The first thing I saw was 2 signs. One had the name of the church. The other one had the name of their coffee shop. When I went up to the church and I looked inside, I saw a huge 45-inch TV screen, just rapid fire, blah, 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 blah. Just like the world. And so far at all, my eyes, it looked like the world. I walked inside and, oh my gosh, it was heartbreaking for me. Someone who's experienced the apostasy. Over on the right was what they called the worship center, which we would call a sanctuary normally, excuse me. Right in front of me was a welcome desk, And the whole place looked like a shopping mall. It looked like a shopping mall. It was modern architecture, very clean. There wasn't anything dirty. The carpet didn't have any parts that were pulled up along the edge. It looked like a brand new built shopping mall. It had these big posts. Everything, all the signs were written sideways on these giant pylons. So you had to turn your head every time to really see exactly what it said. In fact, I had to ask for where the men's room was later, because the door I saw that was the men's room, I thought it said Zen because it was written sideways. It looked like a Z. And Zen would have fit in perfectly with the worldliness of this church. And so I didn't know when it was going to open up, so I went over to the coffee shop. And there were two people there. There was one kind of a young girl, and clearly, developmentally disabled. Just a sweetheart. I mean, she was so nice the whole time I was there. Just a wonderful girl. And then there was this fellow behind the coffee counter. And he said, "I don't have a barista for you yet." I'm thinking, a barista? Am I in a church? And I look around, and the coffee there was at least as much as it is at Starbucks or anywhere else. I mean, a mocha was $4. So he said he'd be able to get me a regular cup of coffee, which he did. So I paid $1.75 for a little, 12-ounce cup of coffee at a church. In this area, there were stands selling Bibles. Took a look, made in China. And again, in China, you don't see this in the news, especially if you watch the leftist news, which is pretty much everything. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Fox News is any different, but, the CNN, NBC, all that kind of thing, they don't tell you what's really going on in the world. I mean, the group that's being slaughtered in terms of sheer genocide more than any other over the last couple decades has been Christians worldwide, just slaughtered. They're being exterminated in parts of Africa and Asia, Middle East. You don't hear that by watching this news that conforms to your ideological viewpoint, that just keeps itching your ears with what you want to hear. The same news that tells you that the Minnesota State Legislature cares anything about anybody who is not themselves. Sorry. In China, they're wiping out Christians. They're absolutely wiping them out. Yet, the Chinese are making all this money by printing Bibles. Just like they print American flags when they've made it very clear that they're a very patient culture. They've been around for thousands of years, and they'll be more than happy to wait until it's their turn to knock us out and take us over, if it becomes their goal to do so. But they'll make our flags in the meantime. This is what China does. So these Bibles are made in China, a place where the person who printed the book, if they read it, they and their family might be hauled outside and shot in the front yard as an example to others. If you didn't know that, you might want to consider looking for different news sources. And if you live in Minnesota, I would definitely not listen to these yahoos here who have done everything they can to make sure that my story doesn't get out. CARE, 11, all these ridiculously named, ludicrous news outlets. They were selling bracelets. They were selling $20 baseball caps. Cheap costume jewelry in this coffee shop. While I was looking for the bathroom, I ended up turning down toward the administrative offices. The administrative offices were larger not only than where I work now, but where I worked before, which was $1 billion international company, and it was the headquarters. Their offices in that one church, their administrative offices, were larger than the administrative offices in our international corporation. And I took a little peep into their boardroom, but they have a boardroom. It was nicer than the boardroom we had at that $1 billion company, with one possible exception. The table in that company I worked for was pretty spectacular, I gotta say, that oak table. None of those people were there. Apparently they worked shorter hours, Anyway, I was not having a good time at all. I was not enjoying this. I really wanted to leave. I did not feel comfortable being in that place. This wasn't a church. This was some modern hybrid that's just, if it isn't, if this isn't like Satan's habitat for humanity, where he's building these things up to get ready for when he's coming to take over things, I don't know what it is. This place really worried me. I mean, I didn't see anything that was really truly having to do with Christianity anywhere. As people started coming in, I realized that they had I guess like some kind of a daycare center. They had a couple meeting rooms where people were going in. I almost thought it was a funeral, but I didn't see any other indication like a hearse or a body or anything. I really don't know what was going on, but over time people started milling about. And the interesting thing was, they all looked, despite being so big and such a place with so many people, except for that one nice girl, for the first, were all looking at me really funny. In fact, that guy at the bar, if I can call it that, in the church, at the beginning, he's kind of asking probing questions. So what are you here for? You have an appointment? I mean, he asked me if I had an appointment when I was at a church. And I was not enjoying it. I then moseyed over to the other side, to the worship center. And one other thing about this church, every intersection, everywhere where there was an intersection, there's a lot, there's just hallways everywhere. There are computer kiosks, like I don't know what you do, like at the airport for checking in, that kind of thing. I couldn't even count how many of these kiosks there were. And when I went to the worship center side, there were a couple of those kiosks right up front. By every door there's one of them, and it says something like donations, or giving, I think it said. Giving station. It's a giving station. It's where you go to the kiosk and you give to this ridiculously wealthy church that is putting all this money into worldly stuff, that if they would just open their Bible and actually read it, because God told us what happens at the end, and He also gave us an awful lot of indications of when the end will be, and pretty clearly it's real soon. But He gave us the end of the story already. The end of the story is He's going to burn this entire planet up with fire, and He's going to replace it. So that big building doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Neither does your home, by the way, or any of the stuff, the little trinkets on your mantelpiece, because they're all going to burn up as well. God said, I'll never destroy the world again with a flood, but He made it perfectly clear He's going to destroy it again with fire. And even if you don't believe that, the point is, the Bible, the book that they claim to follow, makes that perfectly clear that that's what's going to happen. That is exactly what the Bible says. It doesn't even mince words about it. And yet they build this huge church, and they even will put money into making sure the carpet doesn't get rolled up a bit on the end. I mean, when I was in there looking at how clean and sterile this place was, the first thoughts that entered my head were places like China, the Middle East, and Africa, where people have to meet in these dirty, smelly rooms, and they have to literally whisper while they're singing their worship songs, because they'll be assassinated, and their families possibly as well, or their families will be sold into slavery, especially the children. This is what will happen to them if they worship. They're worshiping in dung stalls. They're worshiping in the kind of places where Jesus was born, in a manger. And this church is asking people to give, and I'm just wondering, like, what do you need money for? Unless it's just for the upkeep of this building that, according to your own religion, is going to burn with fire. And if you'd read the book, the likelihood of when that's going to happen is quite soon. Like, really soon. So I went to the worship center, and the doors to the sanctuary have these little strips of glass, and the rest is this beautiful, beautiful wood. Just woodworking there is unbelievable. I go up and I stick my eyes up to those slats where I can look in, and I gotta be honest, I just burst into tears. I just started crying. It was first thing I saw right in front of me. I mean, the area was huge. The huge stage down there, just seats. There were like, it was like an amphitheater, but right in front of my eyes, in between, was a giant television camera, and it was mounted up on a stand with its own chair attached to it. It had all the the levers for moving, panning, and tilting, and everything. And as I looked sideways, there were 2 more of those big cameras on the other sides. It's just a huge amphitheater, you know, Coliseum kind of thing. There's a big drum set down there in an isolation booth. Big stage. It looked like bleachers that you could pull out, and a whole bunch of seats up top, almost like they're going to stick a bunch of deacons or something up there, which, for reasons I won't go into here, you're not supposed to do. As I looked more closely, I noticed there were even gobo lights up top, you know, these DJ lighting. You know, boom, 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 lights flashing, and I mean, it was a theater. It was a theater. It was a combination between a theater and a discotheque. I just started crying. And I didn't think it would be open, but it was. I opened the door and I went inside and I just sat down and I just took it all in, and I was horrified, and my heart was just broken. So I took some time to get over that, and I did film it, and then I went out, excuse me, and by that time, people had come in. The welcome desk and everything had now had people at it. So I went over and first thing I said to them, I don't know why, but first thing I said was, how many pastors does a place like this have? And she just proudly said, 14. 14 pastors. Wow. And I really wanted to just go away, and the truth is I was just trying to get away. I was just like, I was sitting there thinking it, trying to run it through, should I even bother with this? And to be honest, what was on my mind was getting a hold of the head pastor and sitting him down and opening up the Bible, introducing him to the Bible, maybe for the first time, because he wasn't seeming to grasp what's going on here. He did not seem to see what I saw in that place. And his moral brotherhood with these people who are suffering and being exterminated in other countries for their faith. Wow. I mean, this place was a country club. But she talked me into seeing one of the pastors, one of the, I don't know what you would call them, maybe an outreach pastor or something. I said, okay. But I was pretty defeated at that point. So this gentleman came out, he was very nice, shook my hand, said, let's sit down. And here's where it gets really strange. I, very nicely and very professionally, I just laid out what's going on. I work, some miles away here, my car's dead, I do not have access to enough money to both tow it and fix it, and if what's wrong with it is what I think is wrong with it, it's a fix of it's a huge expenditure. And I said, what I'd really like is if it were possible for, with a congregation this size, do you have anybody who owns a towing company or the ability to tow, anyone who works for a towing company, in other words, can help me get the tow, because until I get towed to my mechanic who knows my car and knows my situation and is nice about that, I can't get anything done. Because my car insurance company that I pay so much money to, they would only tow me to the nearest station, which means I'm there with total strangers. They're going to charge me who knows how much more than these good mechanics will. And it took a long time to find those good mechanics who are good to me. And they're not from Minnesota, by the way. Go figure. They're transplants. So I told him this, and I said, that's what I really need, and that's what I was asking for. Do you have a member of your congregation? I said, but I have to be honest, as I look around this place, and I look at how big it is, and multiple services in an amphitheater, I don't think you know your own people well enough to know if any of them work for a towing company. And here's where it got really, really strange. That pastor conceded that point. He said, yeah, you know what, you may be right. There's a lot of people here. It's hard to know them all. And I was, really? Interesting. That's an honest, truthful statement. Wow. And he said, let me see what I can do. Sit right here. He said, would you like something to eat over there? And I said, no, thank you. I'm going to go get a really good meal after this. I deserve it. And I already had some coffee. And he's like, good, sit there. Let me see what I can do. He wasn't gone 5 minutes, and he comes back, and he's on the phone with different towing companies. And he's asking the towing companies to tow me all the way, which is about 14 miles. About 14 miles to my mechanic. And he said he'll pay for it. And by the way, the reason it's 14 miles, in Minnesota there's some really big rivers. And in my case, with the huge rivers, the only way to get from north of the cities, which is Minneapolis, St. Paul, and just immediately south of that, and what you might call the southern suburbs, you have to cross a big, huge river. And the great state of Minnesota, while they're building a football stadium, they've only built 2 bridges across that river. And to cross those bridges, you have to go through maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 miles of nowhere to get off the road. Just horrible traffic. And there's hardly any exits. There's no businesses. So since given the trouble with my car, there was just no way I could chance it, even if I could get it running. Because I could get stranded there, and I would literally be out in the middle of nowhere with this traffic, these maniacs just zooming by at high speed. So that's the reason I had to, it's so hard to cross those rivers. I mean, otherwise I might have just sought to buy a battery myself, put a battery in there, and just run for it and try to get there before the battery died. I don't know if it would have made it or not. But it's too scary. It's too scary crossing the rivers. So the pastor, though, he's on the phone, and he's asking me questions. He's asking me good, relevant questions. I knew what to tell him as well. I told him where I'm at. You know, here's the clearance. I was giving him the specs on the clearance for a large truck and things. And it was just incredibly efficient. And he had to try a few times, but he got a tow truck to come out there. And he said he's going to pay for it. And I want to, first of all, acknowledge that this happened, given my experience with Minnesota churches, including these mega churches. I give credit where it's due. And I give this man credit. You got to understand, if he had not done what he did, I don't know where I would be right now. I mean, this is something where I not only could have lost the car completely and everything in it, I could have lost my job because I have no way to get there. I mean, this gesture, what this guy did, saved me from a major, major catastrophe. And he had just met me a few moments before, whereas the people I work with, all that, they just blew it off as ain't no big thing. It's only happening to somebody else. So I'm giving credit where it's due. Whether this guy is part of a Minnesota church, part of a mega church, or both, he did the right thing. And what he did served the purpose. And here's the point I really want to make. He didn't make me fill out forms. He didn't tell me to commit perjury certifying an address when I don't have one. He didn't even mention social services. What he did was he listened to what I had to say. I could tell he was evaluating whether I was, crazy or possibly a drug addict or something, but that, that's obvious. Of course he's going to make some kind of a judgment call, but that wasn't his main purpose. This guy had a heart to help. And I think he perceived that I was sincere, that I was professional, that at least at the moment I was sober, and I think he felt like this guy's legit. He didn't go to see the car. He didn't go to verify that I was even telling the truth. He listened to what I said. He took, when I told him what I needed, he accepted that, and he took that at face value, and he said, okay, let's see how we can get that for you. He didn't challenge me. He didn't say, well, that's not what you need. What you need is over here. We have a program that will help you. It's only 6 weeks initial, and then, you're going to have to start paying for it then, but it's okay. It's partially subsidized by the government. It's like, no, he just said, okay, you've told me what you need. You know what you need more than anyone else in this world. I'm going to help you get it. And because he did that, everything came out as good as it could under the circumstances. I couldn't ask for more. I could not ask for better performance as a human being, let alone as a Christian, than I got from this pastor at a Minnesota megachurch. And brothers, I'm gonna give him credit. God bless him and his family for what he did. And the thing is, if you go back to the very beginning of everything, even when I was trying to prevent myself from becoming homeless, when I was trying to deal with these maniac neighbors I had, every time I would go somewhere, people challenged everything I said. Now, at one point I had the website, it's long gone now, but I had the website where I proved beyond any shadow of a doubt what my neighbors were doing and what the people who accept the paychecks were not doing. I had documentation out the wazoo. I had 7,000 hours of recordings of my neighbors, including the loudness graphs of all of them. I mean, there isn't a court of, even a kangaroo court couldn't find a way around this one. I mean, everything was in my favor. And yet when I went and just sat down with people, I'm not showing them this, I just talked to them, their initial response is to just not believe it and assume that I am exaggerating or I'm lying or something. The problem is, I wasn't. And when I told them what I needed, like when I went to this church where the pastor said, well, maybe we'll see your stuff on Storage Wars. I went in there with a list. It was like about 5 things. And they weren't huge things, but they required some mobilization. They required people with certain skills and things. And I just went in, much like I did here, and I said, are there people in your congregation with these skills or these abilities or who are willing to help me with this? Probably the biggest, most tough thing was I needed help moving. Because I had to get out of there fast and I had nowhere to go, and I was clearly going to move across the Twin Cities. And all I got was nothing, and maybe we'll see your stuff on Storage Wars. This pastor just blew off everything I said. They were laughing. They didn't listen. They didn't listen and believe what I was saying. And as I went to social services, and they're saying, well, you need to get into these programs, fill out this paperwork, which I can't because I'll commit perjury if I do, but even if I could fill out the paperwork, it doesn't matter. That gets me into their system so that they can get more funding, because they're just gathering, the more of these people who they show that they're helping, the more funding they get, and they get continued funding every year. Nothing comes of it. I could see that with my own eyes. Nothing was coming of it. The only people who got help in social services were drug addicts, maybe single mothers, illegal aliens who broke the law by entering the country against our laws, which isn't a good start as a resident of a new country. Breaking the law as you climb in their window. That doesn't bode very well for the future. Maybe a little integrity going through the immigration process might help, but our social services gave them everything they needed. They wouldn't give it to me, a supposedly healthy single male, competent, sober, sane, hardworking. But what they were trying to do was get me into some housing program, and maybe I'll do a video on this sometime, but from the homeless people I met, they described their government housing as, quote, a prison, and with good reason, based on what they told me. Imagine if every time you went into your home, you had to follow a bunch of rules by someone who's watching you, and they could enter your place anytime they want. They're going to monitor the way you treat your children, and if they just happen to arbitrarily deem it unacceptable, then part of the conditions of you accepting that housing that you pay outrageous amounts for yourself, like in terms of percentage of your income, they could even take your children away and things like that. These places are prisons for homeless people, homeless families in particular. That's what they have there, right? Well, and now I've got someone pulling in next to me. Go figure. Where have I heard that before? And so God, now I lost my train of thought because someone pulled in next to me. So as I went to all these different agencies and groups and government agencies, I knew what I needed for the most part. When I went to the social services and they were trying to get me into these programs where I would get on a waiting list for government housing to enter one of these prisons of theirs. And I'm thinking like, no. I am extremely well educated. I am unusually competent. I'm everywhere I work, whether it's McDonald's or a billion-dollar, international company, I do better work than anyone around me. I'm sober. I've never used drugs in my life. Don't like them. Don't like alcohol. Its effect on me. Don't want anything to do with it. Don't need it. I don't watch television. I'm incredibly responsible. I will, even when I had a home, if I had a problem like this, and I've done it before, I will sleep at my workplace if I have to until my days are off. to make sure that I'm at work when I'm expected to be there, because that's my obligation to my employer. Everyone else just says, "Oh, I'll take a personal day. No notice, I know, 4 hours before work you were expecting me to come in, but I'm just going to call in and say, well, my car broke down. I got to take the day off." I didn't do that. And they're telling me that what I need to do is get into their prison program, their little government housing program for the homeless, after a waiting list that could be up to a year. No. What I did, I went up to them, I told them exactly what I needed. I said, what I need is a job. I need to earn money. If I can earn money, I can probably take care of the rest, as long as I can earn as much as I'm good to earn. I'm capable of earning any wage if people give me a chance. The thing is, with the paperwork, you can't get a job when you're homeless because you have to commit a felony. You have to commit perjury with no address. And I said, that's the problem I have. Help me with that. How do I do it? My preference would be that you supply me with a place to stay long enough to get that residency so that I can get the job. Once I start making money, I have a fair fighting chance, as long as it's decent money, which is not what happened at this job I got here, by the way, at all. This is the kind of money I made back in high school, but it's all I can do. So social services did absolutely nothing. They would do nothing. They would say, well, you're going to do it our way or the highway. They didn't listen to what I had to say. They didn't just say, what? They didn't believe me. They didn't show me enough dignity and respect to realize that I'm competent to know exactly what I need to get out of this. Help me get it, and I'll be out of it. It's that simple. They never once would listen to that. They would always challenge me. Well, we can't do that. We're not going to do that. We don't think that's what you need, okay? Maybe you need some counseling so that you can understand this. And it's like, all right, well, that's why they're working in social services. I'm sorry, but that's, I've always worked in businesses where you're doing big, big, big things. And I like doing that. They're not. They don't even comprehend what I'm trying to do. But, government agencies, no matter who it was, the media, anyone I go to, I say, this is what I need. If I went to the media, I would say, this is the kind of story I want done. There's a reason for it. Okay, I've thought it through. There's a reason for it. And one of the things I've tried to do is to get people mobilized to expose through the media what's really going on with this fake social services. Things like what the Department of Health did, throwing a bunch of people out into the streets right before the holidays, off camera, at a nice prime piece of real estate that I bet someone associated with the Department of Health would love to purchase. I mean, these are the kinds of things going on. These are the kinds of things I want the media to investigate and to talk about, but they won't. They want to do it their way. Okay. Problem is, I'm the one with the expertise on it, aren't I? I'm the one who's in the thick of it. I'm the one who's observing it, taking notes, figuring out what's going on, doing the research that needs to be done. Another thing we need is for these legislators in Minnesota, if not to be exposed, I wish they could just be exposed for the, as far as I'm concerned, criminals that they are, but criminally negligent, if nothing else. Criminally narcissistic. Just nothing matters but themselves. I mean, I've never seen anything like these people. But even if you ignore that, that's a huge project. That's not what I'm out to do. In terms of homelessness, we got to get, at the national level and the state level, we got to get that signature thing removed for homeless people. We got to stop having the government trying to identify your every single move and track your move. Because homeless people can't do anything without breaking the law until that ends. So that's the specific thing I've been asking for there. And I've shown them exactly the reason why. And they don't care, because it's only other people who suffer in this kind of misery. And they don't care about other people, you see. When they're on the campaign trail, they talk about other people. They'll bring a token person up here and a token person there and sing Kumbaya and all that. But they don't care if these people live or die, and they're going to forget what their name was 10 minutes later, once the teleprompter turns off. These people don't care. This pastor at the church cared. And that's what's so strange. And I'll be honest with you, I wonder if I'd gotten one of the other 13 pastors at this place, would I have gotten the same result? I don't know. Is there something about this particular church, or was this just a good person? And I don't know if he's originally from Minnesota or not. I mean, maybe that's worth finding out. I have my suspicions of what the answer would be, but I'm not... He could be a native-born Minnesotan for all I know. The man did the right thing. He did the generous thing, the good thing, the Christian thing, the decent thing. And he did, what he did was exactly what I asked him to do. In fact, he went beyond that, really. I asked him to find someone in his congregation who might be willing to donate their time or defer payment for me to pay for it later or something. He just said, well, I don't have that, so I'm just going to call a tow company and I'm going to pay for it. You know, and I look forward to, you know, probably within a month, I'm sure I'm going to be able to go back there and pay him back. And he doesn't seem to want me to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the reason is because people like me come to people like him for help. And this guy's willing to help. So I want to give that money back to him so that when the next person comes and they're lucky enough to get him, so that he'll have that money available to help them. I don't know what would have happened if I went to one of those other 13 pastors. I might have got another brochure for social services. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I give credit where it's due. Thank you, Pastor David. You did the right thing, and look at the difference it made in my life. You did what I asked to do, and you saved me from an absolute calamity that could have cost me everything, including my job. Now, let's put the slate and go to part 2 here. My car. When I got the car towed and I got it to the mechanic's place, the problem with the car is exactly what I diagnosed it to be. And I mean exactly, and that's a bummer. I had a bit of hope that it might just be the battery, actually, but it wasn't. I had to replace the battery and the alternator. But here's the problem. I have to run this car every winter. It's now been, you know what, I don't know, 3 winters that I've had to actually run it through the whole winter. And then you're running it all the time because you're living in the car, running this engine all the bloody time. And it's leaking oil. The way my engine is, the alternator is below part of the engine block. That part of the engine block is just dripping oil right into the alternator, and there's nothing you can do about it. There isn't any. It's just a perfectly tight fit. It's just oozing oil. The alternator it's a power generator. You know, it has coils and brushes, and it spins around, and it creates a field, and that's what creates electricity. When you start your car, your starter takes a current from the battery to get the car started, gets it moving. That gets your car moving, and then the belt, part of that process, moves your alternator, and the alternator takes over generating all of the power for your headlights, your radio, all your stuff in your car, including the ignition. When your alternator goes out, your car dies because you no longer have the electricity. It reverts back to battery power, and that just drains almost immediately because those batteries aren't meant to run a car, they're meant to start a car. So with that as a power generator, you don't want to drip liquids in there, let's put it that way. You especially don't want to drip flammable, oily liquids into an alternator. So what it means is that this is going to keep happening to my alternator over and over. It may even get worse. So I replaced the alternator and the battery, and probably already, hours later, there's probably already a bit of oil oozing into that alternator. It's going to ruin it again, and I don't know how long it's going to take. The mechanics couldn't tell me. They said we're going to have to see. It could take a couple days before I need a new alternator again. It could take a couple weeks. Could take a couple months. Who knows? You might get a year out of it. We have no way to know. The only thing I know is that when I was digging around in there and I could barely see anything, that alternator was absolutely filthy with oil. It was so covered with oil, I stuck a drumstick down there just kind of probing around. I pulled it out and I was like, what the heck? The whole end of the thing was filled with oil. Black oil. So this is the unsolvable problem with this car. At this point, that is a problem I cannot fix. I can't afford to have them take the whole engine block apart, get all that gasket stuff fixed in this kind of a car. That alone is going to cost, 4 times as much as the alternator did. So the car is essentially done. It's essentially done, and I am just absolutely drained. Between the Minnesota Department of Health costing me so much money by throwing all of us out of an affordable place, and then this brutally, viciously cold, snowy winter since February, where I had no choice but to go get a hotel on my days off. And I'm paying more for that hotel room for 1.5 days every single week than I paid for my entire apartment for the whole month. I'm paying more now than I did when I had a home. And I make about half as much as I did when I had that home. Do the math. There's a reason why I don't have much money. I've still got to pay for my storage. I've got to pay for the car insurance. I got to pay for all kinds of things. I'm not off the hook just because you're homeless. Because you see, the homeless aren't necessarily irresponsible. We do want to pay our bills. Well, last month I had to pay a bunch of money to the government. I had to renew my tags. You know, because I got to pay for all these people who don't do anything. When I say they take the money and they don't do their jobs, well, that's where the money comes from. But guess what? To replace this car, I have to not renew the tags. When I renew the tags, what I do is I go in and I give them money. And they're, money. Here's your tag. Thank you. When you go to get a registration for a car, you got to do another step. You got to sign your name on a document certifying your address. Because if you don't do that, you're committing perjury, a felony. So that means I cannot get another car because it's illegal for me to register it while I'm homeless. Even if I had money to get another car, I can't register it legally without committing a felony. This is something I went to the legislators with. I went to the legislators with this one way long time ago, because it came up as a separate issue. This was shortly after I moved here, maybe within the first year when I moved here. When I registered here, it was so creepy the way that they did business here government here versus other states I'd lived in. It was just really wrong. There was something really spooky about it. And I don't remember the circumstances, but I wrote to my local state legislator, state senator, I believe, and I said, how can you require them to certify this on there? It doesn't make any sense. What if they don't have an address? What? It doesn't make any sense. And he said, well, we have to make sure that the police know how to get a hold of you. And I don't think he meant get in touch with you. I think he meant get a hold of you, like in shackles hauling you off. You see, when a government starts to become oppressive and it takes the Constitution of the United States of America and it cuts it up into shreds and it sets it on fire and burns it and casts it to the wind, you start getting a government who has to know where you are at every single moment, because the day may come when they are finally able to insert something like a Gestapo. And if they don't know where you are, how are they going to come and make contact with you? And I said, well, you know, okay, I get it, sort of. You want to make contact with people. But the other side of that is that you're forcing people to not be able to do what they need to do to function in a life that's worth living. And you're causing that. You see, there's no one really causing you not to be able to get a hold of them, but you are causing these people who previously didn't have this issue, where they could have a normal life and a fighting chance because they could just go out and get their registration. But you are causing it so that they can't do that anymore. And it's ruining lives, and it could destroy lives. And that can have consequences that filters out through society and causes all manner of misery for a lot of people. And you know what that legislator said to me? He said, we deem it more important that the police are able to know where you are. Now, he tried to frame it in terms of, what if your family member has an accident and they have to, your kid has an accident and they need to notify the parents? Really? They're doing all of this. They're causing all that pain and suffering, forcing people to either commit a felony or to not have a life worth living. And it's also that some kid who runs off the road, their parents can be notified within minutes instead of within hours, which is what would happen. Because they would figure out how to reach the parents, you see. They would figure it out. The parents would call up and say, hey, I haven't seen my kid in a long time. Okay, they're just gathering information about citizens, which is not what this government was supposed to do. It is not what the Constitution defines as a function of this government. And that is how you begin to introduce a really rotten, leftist, totalitarian, fascist type of government. Well, fascist is a little different, but still, basically the same thing. And if you look back to Stalin, Hitler, what they're doing in China, it's the same thing. First thing you got to know is everybody gets a number. It's like a social security number. The government knows that number. The government knows where you are at all times. Now, in these days, they can put cameras everywhere with facial recognition. They got it. You know, I'm not even here to even harp on that nonsense, but the point is, that's a part of what this is. And if you don't understand that, then you're not understanding why I'm so upset about it. The reason why I have to fight this battle with committing a felony every time I sign my name somewhere, the reason for it is because these legislators deem it more important, literally the words this senator spoke to me, deem it more important that the government knows where you are at all times. Knows where you are. You're the one with the home, right? They deem it more important that they know where you are at all times. Because if the fish hits the shan, they're going to come for somebody, and they need to know where to come to them. And if you haven't taken a look at our police departments, who look more militaristic than the entire Roman army, if you haven't seen them for a while, you might take a look. God bless police officers. I love them to pieces, but look what they're turning them into. Anyway, not to harp any longer on this, that's the story. To summarize, I went into yet another apostate church. Now I don't know what this pastor's doctrine is. I don't know how sound his doctrine is. I mean, I don't even know if he's a saved Christian for sure. I mean, we didn't talk about that. It's a shame we didn't have a chance. But I like what I saw. God bless him. And I'm actually running out of tape and battery. I'll have to edit this down so you won't get bored watching it. Anyway, well, I was going to say if you have a car you want to give me, please do, because I need it badly, very, very badly, but I can't legally register it in the state of Minnesota, so I'll just let you go instead. Thanks for watching.